Randy is a product consultant, an author, and a podcast host. He's also held roles previously as head of product at Sainsbury's and CX and service quality at HSBC. So Randy's Twitter handle is there. Please do follow him. Andy just recently released his book, which is the title of the talk, What the Hell Do I Do Now? And the rest of the long long title. But I'll let Randy introduce himself in more detail. I do encourage you all to purchase the book. It's a great read. I have it on my Kindle on my phone. It's one of the special reads that you can buy, 15-minute special read. And what I really love about what your introduction to the book, Randy, is it's a short, instructive and meant to be useful right now book of wisdom. So without further ado, I'll hand you over to Randy.
Oh, thank you. That's really kind. Okay, I'll wait for you to put the presentation up. La, 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 la. And there we go. Okay. So as Jenna said, this talk is What the Hell Do We Do Now? It's about a product-led approach to managing your strategic roadmap in a crisis. Book title is actually just What Do We Do Now? We did that to make it a little bit easier for SEO and Amazon reasons. But yeah, a little bit about me. If you don't already know me, you might know my voice from the podcast. I do a podcast for Mind the Product called The Product Experience with Lily Smith. She's the pretty one, but this is me, and I'm the one doing the talk tonight. So anyway, you can get that anywhere. We've up to about 78 episodes now, something like that. And we had a really good one come out today about engaging your customers. I also work as a consultant as my day job. I work specialize in people, processes, and prioritization. I do coaching and mentoring and interim leadership roles. That's all under the brand of Out of Owls. And I also have this other thing called Product in the Ether, which is a chat, a virtual lean coffee that I do on a regular basis. Oops, that went a little too fast. Sorry. Virtual lean coffee. You're welcome to sign for that. It's running every couple of weeks right now. It's at pitta.social, and it's a lot of fun. We talk about, well, whatever you want to talk about. So I'm here to mostly talk about the book and the lessons in it. I'm probably going to tell you actually most of what's in the book, but not quite all. So I do all these jobs mostly because I like talking to people a lot. I like hearing from other people and learning from them, and I try and maximize the amount of time I get to talk to and listen to and learn from other people. And a couple months ago, about 3-4 months ago now, I kept hearing the same thing over and over from people. The same basic thing was COVID is coming. COVID is coming. And it was really very Game of Thrones. And I was having these conversations with people, and they were all getting really nervous because they didn't know what to do. And as the great philosopher Mike Tyson once said, everybody has a plan until they get punched in the mouth. And my friends, all these people I was talking with, they didn't have a plan for what to do in this type of situation. And the conversations I was having with them were coming down to the same few pieces of advice and the same basic topics, and they really resonated very well. So I sat down to write an article about it to try and widen that conversation from the individuals I was having it with to, well, everybody. And that article just got longer and longer and longer. And then I did an outline of all the points I wanted to make and realized there's about 10 points, and there's lots of things that could be turned into entire blog posts or potentially even chapters. So I sent a pitch note over to Josh Seiden and Jeff Gotthelf, who publish Sense and Respond Press. They specialize in these business books that are meant to be read over lunch. They're short, they're cheap, they're really useful. You know, most business books are like 400 pages of information with about 50 pages of content and a few hundred pages of filler. They've figured out how to do it without the filler. Also, they're really smart. And I figured if they endorsed the things I was saying, then I was probably saying something worthwhile. And finally, the pitch was, can we do this? Can we do this really quick? And can we put all the profits to pandemic relief? And to my surprise, they said yes. Which meant that I actually had to write the damn thing. So I spent another couple weeks working on it, did a few rounds of edits with them, and it's out now. So I'm going to echo Janice's comments. Please do buy it. Like I said, all profits go to charity. Also, I think it's pretty good. So talk tonight's going to be in a few different parts to reflect the chapters of the book. Part 1 is about going back to basics. And why do we go back to basics? Well, this is what we do as product managers. This is our specialty. We do discovery. We figure things out, and we have an entire tool set for this. So let's apply to what we already know about discovery to the strategy of what we should do right now. Let's work with our stakeholders. Let's work with our customers. Let's work with our partners and figure this out. Let's review everything we've done and see, is it appropriate to what we're doing now? And the first thing we need to talk about, and the place we always start as product managers, is our customers. So what do we know about them? Well, we have personas, and we base things on this. And I think you probably do have personas. I hope you have personas, right? But the personas that we developed last year, or even back in January and February, are they still valid? Even once we've done a month or two ago, and as lockdown rules change, as things change over the course of this epidemic, are the problems that people are facing the same ones that they had before? And this is a question we need to ask again and again and again and keep revalidating. Is the problem the same? Is the prioritization of the problem the same? Is their ability to do something about it the same? This is really key. We all know that the hardest thing in the world to change is somebody's habits. But we've got this external stimuli that's forced a massive change to everybody's habits. We've all adapted over the last few months to how we do things. And I know from my perspective, referring back to the podcast we did today, we released today, my relationship skills at home have definitely been tested over the last few months. Take all this stuff and use it. Use everything that you've learned, everything you've developed, and apply it to the way you work with your customers. And I know some companies that are really good at this, companies that excel in doing jobs to be done, actually understood their personas really well, and they did a reprioritization of which jobs they needed to tackle, but they didn't necessarily have to throw everything out and start again. But it's one way of doing it. Jobs to be done is a really useful tool. Sometimes it works great, but it doesn't always. But yeah, think about your customers. What are the problems that they have, and how are you going to prioritize that for them right now? The next one is, it's not only the customer's problems, it's where are they going to solve those problems? What does the market look like? What are the choices that they have? And no one predicted the situation that we were going to be in, and very few people planned for it. And we've had a lot of disaster. We predicted that early on, and we've certainly had that. There's been way too much loss of life. There's entire industries in deep trouble, and lots of us have lost jobs. But there's also massive opportunities for people. When we start working on a new product, we take a look at the gaps in the market. We look at the opportunity space. It can be based on price, on quality, on availability, on features, on usability. All of these things are possibilities. And we look at the players and we map out what we can offer that will make a difference. But everything has changed. You need to continue to look at this again. The regulatory landscape has changed. Who's going out of business? Who's going to be able to open up? Who was saddled with too much debt? Who's getting acquired? Who's getting bailed out? And that's just for your competitors. Also look at the customer space as well, obviously. And we all want to build a defensible moat around our advantages. But it's time to also look at who of your competitors, whose moat is something you can cross now. What assumptions had you made about the market in your positioning, your roadmap, and your release plan? Go back and look at all this stuff and validate it again. There's a few different ways you can do it. There's two things that I recommend. One is called scenario planning. It's more of a management consulting thing, and it's a really easy and interesting way to do this. And it's not something I had ever known about the formal title for, but something I had done in the past. Another one is something called Wardley mapping. And if you've ever heard of this, this is a picture of it right now. It will totally screw up your head the first time you try and apply it. It takes a little while to get used to, but it's a really powerful way of mapping out value chain analysis and really understanding, is this something that's a commodity? Is this something we should build? Is this something we should buy? Is this something we should develop? It's a really interesting way of looking at it. I definitely recommend spending an afternoon poking around about it. So once you've got your customer well understood and the market understood, now you need to make a plan. But roadmaps, they've had some problems over the past few months because COVID came along and 2020 came along and pretty much said this to your roadmap. And that's no fun at all. So there are two things that I talk about that you should do with your roadmap at this point. One of them is a question you've probably asked already, or I hope you've asked already, but it's worth asking again. Is there something we can do to help with the current situation? And that can be helping public, it can be helping individuals, it can be helping your company, the people who work around you. Because there's no right way to answer this question. It can be, early on, it was about PPE, and it was about providing alcohol and sanitary hand wipes and things like that. But things that help people just to live their lives and survive and thrive in their relationships and their mental well-being are still incredibly important. And things that will help people to continue to have jobs and keep the economy going are also important. So there's no wrong way to answer this question except by not asking it. And the next one is to think about, is what we're currently working on still the best thing to do? Again, you've probably asked this one already. You've probably done something about this, but you need to think about it on a regular basis as the conditions on the ground change. So you do a reprioritization exercise after you've asked these questions. But when we do prioritization, it's based on a few things. So we talked about the fact that it's based on market analysis and customer personas. It's actually personas, then analysis. I've got it in the wrong order. Apologies. But you take those two things together, and what do you get? You get a series of bets or hypotheses, which you then prioritize. And hypotheses are an interesting thing. It's always important to make sure you get the terminology right about this stuff. A hypothesis is based on a fact, something we know, plus an assumption. I know this. I think if we do this, this result will happen. And those are the stories. Those are the epics. That's everything that we kind of do when we go into discovery and build phases. It's the iteration that we do. But assumptions are tricky, because assumptions can sometimes have an emotional component with them. And an assumption plus an emotion, that's an opinion. And when you're talking to stakeholders, when you're talking to other people, and they've developed an opinion about something, that's something that a fact may not change. And if we're taking this scientific and rigorous approach to iteration and working on things, then we have to be really conscious of which things are facts, which may have changed over the last few months, which things are assumptions, and which things are these dangerous buggers called opinions. And there's a lot of ways to look through this. You can do assumptions mapping and impact mapping. Theory of change is something that's used in the NGO community quite a lot. My favorite is one I've developed myself. It's called dragon mapping. It's for any result that you want to have happen, any outcome that you want, just keep asking, for this to happen, what has to be true? And for each of those things, label it. Is this a fact or an assumption? And if it's an assumption, is it one that's not got an emotional component, or is it an opinion? And that will help you to understand how to deal with these things. And anything that's not a fact needs to be tested. Because if it's not tested, you're building your entire strategy on something that is a complete unknown. So try to prioritize testing around all of those assumptions and opinions and learn how to deal with them. So at this point, you might have your roadmap and you might have a pretty good plan of how to work on things. But the other part of what we do is then forecasting the future. Didn't realize we were psychic, but your customers certainly expect you to, and your boss always expects you to, and your sales team, they always want to know, when can I have it? So we need to be able to predict the future, and that's based on our capabilities. Typically, we do that based on how things have gone in the past. How has the team worked together? And while things may have moved on a little bit since we were all feeling a bit like this, it's still going on, and we still have to be conscious about it. And it's been said a million times, this is not the new normal. This is not working from home. It is different, and we still have to be conscious of it and remember it. We have to think about who is available. Are people available? Even some people have been furloughed or not working at all. Some people are not available because they're caring for people at home, or they're homeschooling, or they're sharing responsibilities for other things. So thinking about, are they available, and how available are they? Also, things like Zoom and Miro and things like that are incredible tools, and they've done a lot, but not all tools are accessible to us. Not everything we had in the office it may be available. So we may not be able to do some of the things we were hoping to do. And we also have to think about our access to our partners and to our customers. Are they available to us? Some of that goes back into thinking about the workspace itself, because now we're at a different phase. We have to plan for going back. And there are some good things and, well, some bad things about the workspace. For me, people not commuting is bad because there's less time for them to listen to my podcast. And also for me, I like commuting to listen to other people's podcasts. And I like being social. I like being in space with other people, but not all the time. I've been working remotely on and off for the last 15 years, and I really enjoy having the option to do it. I hate having to do it every single day. And I lose things around the ambient experience around me when I'm in an office. Who's put things up on the wall? What are the screens doing? What's the awareness I have of how other people are working? We're creating a lot of silos these days that we have to very consciously work around. And we lose that serendipity of just talking to the person sitting across from you, somebody at lunch or at coffee. So we have to work very hard to manufacture that experience. We also have to think about the workspace remotely. This is actually the home office of somebody I know, and I'm incredibly jealous of this because I guarantee you my office looks nothing like this. The space I'm in right now is not as neat as this. But you have to be really conscious and intentional about setting up the way that you work. Sitting on the couch was fine for the first couple of days. Sitting at your dining table may have been okay. It's not comfortable. It's not conducive to longer term working. So some companies have changed the way they do their benefits packages, and they have advanced people money so that they can buy another monitor, upgrade their Wi-Fi, a desk, or a chair. This stuff is really important. But so is that social, that ambient, that the incidental contact, and being intentional about how you work with everyone else is really important. There's a company I know that Deliveroo's lunch to people on the team once a week so that they can have a team lunch and spend some time just talking about whatever was on their mind. And designing these things intentionally is incredibly important. Where we're going to work and how we're going to recruit is going to change as well. The war for talent is going to be really different if everyone can work remotely, because now you're not just competing for local talent, you're competing for anybody local to your time zone. So you can recruit wider, but so can everyone else. There's a company I know called Simprints that's based, I believe, in Cambridge, and we did a really great podcast with them about their hiring process. And they're an NGO, they're a charitable or public good organization, and they try to recruit engineering talent on the scale of Google and Facebook, who can pay a hell of a lot more than they can, but they have a mission and a purpose and a very intentionally designed process that lets them hire these absolutely incredible people, and with a very high rate of acceptance as well for their offers. And that's something they track as one of their key metrics. Something that hopefully will change for the better is demising of the idea of presenteeism, just being at your desk and giving the illusion of working, productivity theater. Because we've always tried to tell people, and we know as product people, that managing for outcomes is more important than managing for outputs. It means we have to have a good definition of what they are and have communicated them to everyone else. But this has always been a superpower, the idea that now you have to be able to give people and teams a certain amount of autonomy because you can't sit on top of them. Even if that was ever a good idea, but you can't really do it right now, means that you have to have figured out how to do this. So hopefully presenteeism as an idea is something that is going to largely disappear. And if it isn't, keep working on trying to do so. And finally, in terms of work culture, think about your deployment cycles. Because if you are the kind of company that released annually or quarterly or monthly, trying to pivot to doing it more quickly, that's not trivial. It takes a corporate culture. It takes muscles within the company to deploy well. It's not just about getting code into production. It's about getting a result from your customers. So that's sales and that's marketing and support. That's any number of other teams. But it's also, are your customers in this time in a position to make use of changes that you make? So really put some intention and some thought into what your deployment cycles are and if you're going to change them. Okay, next part of this is about execution. Now, I'm not going to spend too much time talking about this because really I want you to buy the book. And this is the part that is mostly that I keep as a secret. But there's one key thing that I should tell you about. And it's the idea that when you have your strategy, you should be able to explain it to a 6-year-old because you're not going to be in a room with people. And if you can do this, then it is something that everyone can really understand and will be able to align and execute on. But if you can't, you're going to have a lot of confusion and you're going to spend a lot more time working on your communication on a day-to-day basis. So, quick review of where we are in all this. I'd like to put it together as a pyramid. So starting at the beginning, you identify that opportunity space. Again, we all know this. We've done this. This is our day job. But looking at personas and market analysis and redoing that work. Then you go to solving the problem for your customers. How are we going to do? What's that roadmap and that release plan going to be? What are the bets that we're making, the hypotheses? What are the assumptions? What are the facts? And then spending some time reviewing, how are we going to work together on it? What are our current capabilities? How are we going to work? But, obviously, I'm not going to tell you, like I said, everything about the plan, because I don't have the answer. No one has the answer, and there is no one answer. But the important thing right now is that you're asking the right questions and that you're having the right discussions. And that's what I'm trying to communicate in this book and in this talk, that our teams and our management teams are having the right discussions. And this is our day job. This is what we do all the time. It's what we should have been doing for the last 10 years anyway. And hopefully you are. This is our superpower. It's our time to shine on these things. Make sure that you're questioning your assumptions, that you're redoing your roadmaps, updating your prioritization, and learning all the time. So one last thing I'm going to talk about. For the last couple of months, I've been asking people, what's one thing you've learned since this all began? And originally it was more about lockdown. And with all the events going on, mostly in the States, but here as well over the last few weeks, it's something I've been reflecting on a lot. And again, learning is something that we're supposed to be good at. Iteration is something that we're supposed to be good at. I go back to the U.S. Constitution. It talks about forming a more perfect union. Obviously, America isn't perfect, but it's striving, in theory, to get better. That's what we do as product people as well. So keep learning and thinking about what's one thing that you've learned. So I got a bunch of people to do some stuff on a video. You can see it there at my site. It's outofowls.com/one thing. I would love if you would participate in the video as well. I got the idea from this great stunt video of stunt women and Hollywood actresses fighting each other. They each give a punch to the camera, and then they react and do something interesting, and then do a punch or a kick to the camera. We're doing it with a Sharpie and Post-it notes because, well, we're product people. But anyway, I think it's a really fun video. I'd love for you to participate and send me some more. So thank you all very much. That's the end of this talk. I'd love it if you stayed in touch. Please do listen to the podcast. Please do come to Product in the Ether. We've got an event next week. If you're interested in just talking about whatever's on your mind with some other smart product people, sign up at pivot.social. And if there's anything else I can help you with, buy the book or contact me at Out of Owls. Thank you very much. I think there's a bunch of comments, hopefully some questions, and we can have a chat now.
Fantastic, Randy. Thank you so much. That was really, really interesting. For me, I know it's really practical and actionable advice that you share, and it couldn't be more current than what people are facing right now with this current crisis. And it's really, like, as you show the pyramid at the end, it's a really actionable plan that you can implement straight away and really help focus. One question, I'll just say to everybody online, if there's any questions that you have for Randy, just pop them into the chat window there. I have one question, Randy, to kickstart. What I found quite interesting about what you were saying, when you're looking at the capabilities and this whole idea of presenteeism, I think that's a really interesting concept, and I love that you're, encouraging us all to resist a return to presenteeism. Like, for me, that's fantastic. I've worked remotely for 8 or 9 years now. So when you say the one thing that I've learned, is that I have, I'm quite adept at remote working, actually, because I've been doing it for so long. So it's very familiar to me. I guess one thing with that presenteeism and remote learning that, product leaders will, and business owners will face is this whole idea of, decision making. And how do you manage decision making when you have a distributed team? Do you have any thoughts on that or any advice?
I mean, I'm going to give the full product answer. Sorry, it depends. It's the foolproof answer for any question in this space. But the idea being, decision making is something that's hard at the best of times. It doesn't matter who's there. It's about providing the information and making that decision. But there are many different ways of making a decision. Roman Pickler on his site has a really wonderful chart guiding you through some different ways, because sometimes you get fooled into thinking you need consensus on something, and that's not always true. Sometimes the decision is yours to make, sometimes it's yours to delegate, sometimes you need to advise people, and sometimes you actually do need consensus. And defining that is really one of the key steps for me, is understanding who needs to be informed and who needs to be involved in that decision process, and then what information do you need to make that decision? How long is that decision going to be valid for? And when are you going to review it? Are all really key things. But I think Roman's chart, it's available as a free resource on his site. I've handed that out as a coach to some other people, and it's been an eye opener, because it's just one of those things. We all know this in theory. It's not rocket science, but being reminded that you actually have the power to make a decision sometimes or delegate it, it's really refreshing.
Yeah, it kind of talks to the concept, the RACI concept as well, for responsibility, the RACI matrix. It reminds me of that, but applying it in a decision context. Okay, I'm going to jump over and see, so to the members online. So anybody got a question there for Randy? I'm scrolling back up through the comments. So Graham, hi there. Graham has commented that he's really missing the regular contact with his development team, and he's really loving the idea that a team lunch video call using Deliveroo. So I think Graham might try and get that off the ground in his company.
I know some other teams that do some interesting stuff. I've met teams that play Dungeons and Dragons and other role-playing games together, which may or may not be your cup of tea, but what they do say is, when they have done this, is they've learned things about people's personalities that they never would have learned in any other context. I've seen teams do Pictionary and other kinds of games. And yeah, it's important. If you were in the office, you would have been going out to the pub every once in a while, or going to lunch and doing things that were not work conversations that actually do help facilitate the way you work together. So do plan to do that whenever you can.
Yeah, and also Victor has just shown some appreciation, saying thank you. He always enjoys your talks, and he's purchased a book, and looking forward to reading. So any other questions here? People are being a bit shy this evening, unless I'm not getting questions coming through. Anybody got a question?
Well, if you've got one and you're too shy now, please feel free to go onto the Twitters and ask, or anywhere else that you can get to me. Yeah.
Randy, I have another question in relation to your dragon mapping. I was quite curious about that. Can you talk to us a little bit about that, a little bit more detail?
Yeah, it's I find that all of the different techniques and frameworks that we use, they're wonderful tools. They're all used very situationally. I like this one because it works for me and helps facilitate a conversation. And this is one of a lot of the other ones I have trouble explaining to people who are outside of the product and dev space. What is it we're trying to do? They have their own language and their own techniques that they use, but this one comes from a slightly different space and just says, what's the outcome we're trying to do? If we can agree on that, for this to be true, what are the things that have to happen? I'm sorry, for this to happen, what has to be true? And let's go through each of these things, because it's very easy for you to sit and talk to someone and think that they are seeing the world from the same perspective as you. but they may have different priors and different assumptions, and you may actually fundamentally disagree about some of the things that they're basing their take on. And that's not going to come out unless you put some rigor to it. But you've got to do that in a way that's not confrontational, in a way that doesn't make them feel like they're on the spot and not feel defensive. So you just say, for this to be true, for this to happen, what has to be true? And we go through each of these things and we can say, is that actually a fact? Can we prove it? And the rigor is on both you to prove anything you think is a fact, but on them as well. And then anything that's a question, you can hopefully dispassionately say, okay, how do we find out if this is true? What's the quickest and cheapest and easiest way? Can we ask somebody? Can we test it? What do we do? But that's an easy way to start. If you're having disagreements and tensions with people, if you're not able to quite get where you need, that's the technique I like to use. Okay,
and that's where your questions come in, the 5 whys, because by asking the question, you're not actually upsetting anybody. You're simply looking. Yeah, well, it's a more diplomatic way to go about getting those assumptions to become facts. Okay, so a little comment from Katie there saying, thanks so much, Randy. Love the book and great talk. And we have a question from Matt. So Matt has asked if you could talk more about the delivery side. He's working on his first beta release and could use a good story.
I'm sorry, I'm not sure. Matt, I'm going to ask you if you could elaborate on that a little bit more in the comments. I'm not sure what about the delivery side. If you can put a little more context. I see that there's another one that came in as well. If we can skip that and then come back to you, Matt.
Sure. So the second Matt has asked a question. Can you give a short overview or intro to the Wardley mapping? It looks interesting, but confusing.
Yeah, I think that's a very accurate summation of it, Matt. I'm going to try and hold this up to the camera and see if this is a little pad I have of a Wardley map overview. I bought this online for just a couple of quid. The basic idea of it, though, is that most of the things that we do are actually diagrams. And let's see if I can explain this right. Simon Wardley is the guy who developed this, and the way he started was London to Birmingham is 120 miles or something like that. But London to Cambridge may also be 122 miles, which means you can either assume that Birmingham and Cambridge are 2 miles apart or 240 miles apart. And most of the things we do are diagrams. When you move something around in the diagram, it doesn't make any difference to the reality of the situation. But a map is something that when you move something across it, it means there's a definitive change. So that idea of London, Birmingham, Cambridge, distance is one thing, but direction is really important as well. And the same thing comes into play here, because we can easily say two things are next to each other on a diagram, but until we put that Rosetta of the value chain of understanding how one thing relates to another and how moving it affects it, then we don't really fully understand the system and what changes we're going to make do. So the opportunities might be that there are certain things that we are spending a lot of time and effort on building ourselves that actually they can be a utility, or they can be something that we purchase. They may not be part of our core value chain. They may not offer us or our customers value for us to do that differently. And we can cut a whole bunch of things out. And it is really complicated to do this well. It takes practice. But the concept, once you go through it a few times, the example he tends to use in his basic talk is around a cafe, and that's made a custom teapot. And why would you do that? That's a utility. The water, the thing that you're actually serving is hot water with infused tea in it. The teapot is almost ancillary to that product. It's how you brew the tea. But that may or may not be something that the customer actually notices. You may not need to spend the time on it. And so development time, cash, everything else, totally outsource that, make that a utility or a commodity, and then you can move on with your lives and do the things that distinguish you. It's really hard to get this perspective sometimes when you've been working in a company, especially one with lots of legacy systems. And mapping things out this way can really help.
That's great. That really makes sense. I'm going back to your Game of Thrones analogy at the start, and I'm seeing them, over their map when they had physical pieces.
Yeah.
And the famous coffee cup appeared, and moving things about, and in some ways it's strategizing, isn't it? But visualizing it through the Ward V mapping. Matt has come back in. The other Matt has come back in with a bit more detail. So I'll just read this out to you. So you talked briefly about making sure you were thoughtful in the delivery process. Any pitfalls to look out for as I work with a team to start delivering regularly?
Oh yeah, that makes a lot more sense. Thank you for the context. What I keep seeing from people is they're able to move things into production, move code into production, put a new feature out, but they haven't thought it all the way through. And then it gets to a customer, and they call up support for some reason. It's something it doesn't work quite as expected. Something's a little bit different. They're a little bit confused, and support had no idea that this feature was released. Or sales and marketing are promising something that you didn't do. They're promising things that you had talked about having in the release that didn't make it to the release, or they don't know how to sell the current version of it. They're working from outdated decks and materials, and they're not able to talk to their customers accurately. So it's really making sure that you've got that alignment and cultural alignment across everyone to understand what is it you're doing, what is changing, and what is the intention of it. And making sure that you haven't just pushed something out because you thought it was easy, making sure you have that communication and that alignment all in place. One easy way to do that is to change the normal Scrum board and add an extra column to it. So normally we say the last column in a Scrum board is done, and that's when all the tasks are done and things are into production. But that's not why we did it in the first place. We did it because we had a hypothesis that doing this would reduce churn or would increase usability or something. Until we measure that, we don't actually know if we've done it. And this makes it not a pure product or development team activity, but it is, we put this out there, but we didn't tell anyone, there was no marketing about it, so no one used it. So now you've got a reason for marketing to look at this board as well and have all their tasks aligned to it. Say, great, things are in production, but we haven't accomplished this goal because we haven't done this part. And putting that all together really works. It means that you can have planning and retro sessions with people outside your team that directly affect the success of your team. It doesn't mean they have to take JIRA tickets and have to come to daily stand-ups, but it does make for a board that's much more understandable and better conversations with a wider range of people.
That's fantastic. Thanks, Randy. Matt, hopefully that answered your question. Matt is just, the other Matt is just saying, thank you. It's given me enough to understand what I'll be watching when I dig out some more videos on YouTube. Fantastic. One next question, and maybe the last question, is from Neve. So Neve is wondering, how would you recommend communicating upwards to executive teams and others outside of the product team on changes to the roadmap that they had previously expected and are no longer happening at this time?
Yeah, again, this is an it depends answer. If the priors have changed, if fundamentals have changed about customers, about marketplace, about budget, about capabilities, then of course that's going to have an effect. And hopefully people senior to you have thought about that. And hopefully there have been formal planning sessions and things you can do that with. The problem is no framework or no technique is going to fix a crappy culture. And if you don't have the communications engagement that you need to have in the first place, whether that's whether it's your responsibility or your boss's responsibility or somebody else, I can't give you, there is no quick win to say just do this and it automatically fixes itself. One thing I have found that helps, and this is something you need to start doing a little bit earlier in the process, is motivation mapping. It's understanding for those senior executives, what is it that they're their bonus is based on? What are their objectives based on? What is their motivation for having this thing delivered? Because if you can say, we're not doing this feature because things have changed, but we understand that this is the number, this is that you're trying to affect, or this is the thing that you actually want done, and we're going to try and achieve it a different way. That works much better than just say, you can't have this anymore. Really try to invest in understanding them and making sure you have that relationship in the first place.
That's great. Actually, that talks to a talk that we had a couple of months ago about influencing from the middle, actually, and understanding what your colleagues' motivations are. That's fantastic. We have KG. KG has a question here. So any tips for helping teams get used to embracing uncertainty and trust the process of making strategic bets, particularly where an organization has historically been output rather than outcome focused?
Okay, I'm going to reference two wonderful, a really great blog post and a really great talk. So let's do the talk first. Lucy McLean talked at Mind the Product in Manchester last year, 2 years ago. I think it was 2019, if I remember correctly. And she did this great thing about portfolio investment theory, and the idea that like 70% of what you do is keep the lights on, 10% incremental improvements. And then there's the other stuff that you're probably going to fail on more often, but these are the things that you only have to hit every once in a while. It's what Ken Norton talks about, 10x rather than 10%. But you need to have a balance of both and make sure you understand in your portfolio that some of these things need to be steady and just getting a tiny bit better. But some of these other things have been identified as these are much riskier. We're not going to give them as much time. We're going to review them much more tightly. But if any one of them hits, it's going to be absolute gangbusters. So that's one. The other is there's a woman named Liz Keogh. It's Keogh, who has this incredible thing, blog post about estimating complexity. And it's very simple, so you do your story points and all these things, but there's this other component of how much confidence do we have in those story points? And she has a scale of, we've all done this, we know exactly how long it's going to take, we've done this 1,000 times. Then it's somebody on the team has done this, and we know how long it'll take them to do it, but maybe Janice, you're doing it this time, and it's a learning opportunity for you, and you've never done this before, so it might take you have access to this other person. But we don't know if you'll do it as quickly as they did it because it's your first time. Then it's, okay, somebody on another team did it, and we don't know if we have access to them, but we know it's possible in our environment. Then there's somebody, another company has done it, but we don't know their circumstances, and they may be totally different, but it has been done before, so we know it's at least theoretically possible. And finally, no one's ever done this before anywhere. We're trying something new. And you put that against your confidence score, and you be really clear, again, with your stakeholders and the people holding you to account, where are you in the confidence on this, and where are they in the confidence on it? And it makes a massive difference, but especially if you're saying, we're trying something new, so give us a break on this. And then especially the things that you have less confidence on, if you can put that into the more moonshot, marshot, 10x bucket, then you're, from the portfolio perspective, then you're in a really good shape.
Fantastic. KJ, have lots of takeaways there for you, hopefully. So I think that's everybody. We had loads of questions there in the end, which is fantastic. So we might just do, Randy, is there anything that you want to finish up on, or just, I'll say to everybody, if you haven't already bought Randy's book, please do. And Randy, if there's anything you want to wrap up on.
Just if you're start doing talks about the book as well with companies. If your company wants me to come in and do this talk or something similar that's a little more targeted, let me know. Normally, as a consultant, I would charge for this sort of thing, and this would be an advertisement, and I hate doing that. What I'm trying to do in this case is just buy some books and make it a charitable donation. So if you're interested, just get in touch.
Oh, that's fantastic. I'll wrap up. And just to say to everybody, thank you for coming along. We're going to be jumping over into the Google Hangout. It's in the event page on the Mind the Product website, and also on Meetup if you want to click on that link and come and join us in the Hangout. Randy, you're very welcome to come along too. And yeah, just to say, we're always looking for people to speak. So if any of you attending tonight are interested in speaking, please reach out to myself, Niamh, or Keji.
Can I say something about that?
You can.
So one of the best talks I ever saw was by Sean Russell many years ago. He and I did it the first time I ever did ProductTank London. He was on stage the same night, and his talk was he had been a product manager for less than a year, and he said, "What I wished I knew a year ago," and it's a fantastic topic. And if you don't know what else to talk about, but you're interested in talking, steal that topic and just make it your own. Just what do you wish you knew? What have you learned in the past year or however long? It's a fantastic way to structure a talk, and anyone can do it.
That's really powerful, actually. I might have to borrow that one. So yeah, please do continue to participate. Join us in the conversation on Twitter at ProductTank Brum. We have a LinkedIn group, and we'll be releasing details about what we're doing next month. There is the Mind Product Con Digital. It's a conference that's happening on the 13th, 14th, and 15th of July. If any of you are interested in attending, definitely check it out. Full details are on the Mind Product website. And Niamh has just popped the Hangout link into the chat window there. And also there was a sign-up sheet at the start as well, if people wouldn't mind. We don't know who's online on these live events, except for people commenting in the comments. So please do pop your name in there so we can stay connected. So Randy, I'll just say thank you again. And hopefully get to see you in person sometime soon.
Fantastic. Thanks again for inviting me. Have a great night.
Okay, take care. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye.